All right, let's get started. Thanks for joining and welcome. We're both very excited to announce this week as a part of Ignite Conference and last week at Build Conference that we're releasing the public preview of the Skype Web SDK. This session will be taking a technical deep dive into that SDK and going through some of the scenarios that you can enable, as well as Sri is really going to be diving into code and showing you how you can actually get started and build out your own sample. My name's David Newman. This is Sri, the brains behind the operation.
Hey folks, I'm Srividya Chandrasekharan. I go by Sri just to make it easy on you guys.
By the end of this session, we really hope that you guys are as enthusiastic as we are about the capabilities that we're enabling in this latest Web SDK, and that you really want to get coding and start coding using this SDK tonight, which is available right now. Give a quick overview. We are really going to be focused on the technical details here in this session. So we're going to start off with a quick look at a couple scenarios just to get you kind of thinking through what you might be able to enable in your own applications using this SDK. Then we'll essentially dive right into the technical details, and then we'll move on into actually coding a sample. If we actually have some time permitting at the end, we'll look a little bit at some debugging and how you can look at your apps and know which error codes you're looking at to figure out what your issues are with your code. And also, when you're ready to deploy, what is the IT admin configuration that you have to do to actually deploy your web apps to your environment? Just so we have a good idea, how many people are actually developers in the room who actually code for a living? Perfect.
That's a good number.
You guys are going to like this session. Do we have any IT pro, IT admins in the audience? Great. So we'll try and include some information for you guys, even though we'll be kind of focused around the code details as a part of this. One thing we want to do is we didn't really give too detailed introductions to ourselves. So we're actually just going to use the Skype Web SDK technology to introduce ourselves and give you a little background. So I'm going to jump over to my machine. Make sure I get the right switcher. So you can see here what all I have open is these are actually the samples that are available to you right now. And we'll give you some more details about how you actually get to these. These are our samples in preview for this Web SDK. For here, to introduce ourselves, I'm actually just going to authenticate directly from the web page as my own domain user. So I'm going to log in with my Microsoft.com credentials. And right now, we're going to sign in. So we're going to go through a lot of the details and actually how you perform these operations. But right now, I just want to show you these samples very quickly. So you can see I've signed in as myself. We're going to look at one of the samples, the self sample. And here you can see we've actually pulled data using the Web SDK based on my actual Skype for Business data. So you can see here I've got my title available. I'm a program manager with the partner engineering team in our Skype developer platform ecosystem. And we manage some of our developer platform programs as a part of my team. You can see here that I've got my note. I've got an out-of-office message. This is actually the same note. If you'll see if I pull up the Skype for Business client, this is actually the same note I've got here. And you can actually see I have the ability directly from the web page to change my presence right from within the page. So we'll go into much details, but again, that's just an introduction to me. Now I want to introduce Sri. To do that, I'm actually going to pull her contact information from the Skype for Business network. So let me enter her alias. Hopefully I get the spelling right. So we're going to grab her contact information. And Sri, do you want to introduce yourself?
Once again, I'm Srividya Chandrasekharan. Go by Sri. I'm a PM in the Skype engineering team.
Perfect. And you can see we've pulled a lot of various data. We'll go into details here. And we can also have ability, we could have pulled her picture, which would have been nice into this page. You can see here I can also subscribe to various changes in her status, and I can see, I can see her current presence here, see her note, and see what the different capabilities that she has on the Skype for Business side. So jumping back in, that's our brief introduction. Let's go over to the slide deck. So we're going to focus very much on the Web SDK, but I want to give a quick snapshot of the overall Skype developer platform. Does anybody able to attend that developer session yesterday about the introduction to the Skype developer platform? A couple? I'd highly recommend that you watch the recording of that session, because that really gives you a full overview of kind of the end-to-end capabilities that are built on our communications network. So that includes the Microsoft investments across communications with a foundation in Skype for Business and Skype for Consumers. You can see here that we enable a rich set of SDK and services that range from everything from a Skype button to put in your small business website to be able to engage with your customers, to a full-fledged contact center built on the Skype for Business technology. So there's a broad range of opportunities there for developers and for partners and customers, and you can basically create applications that go across different devices, different platforms, appliances, and also create powerful services that can enable your communication scenarios. So let's get into the good stuff. So what we're going to be talking about today is this Web SDK preview, and what does that actually mean? What are we going to enable you to do? The Web SDK enables you to actually integrate communication capabilities and Skype capabilities directly within your line of business web applications. So there's no dependency on having that Skype for Business client or jumping out from your own experience. You can build these capabilities directly into your app. How many people are familiar with the Link 2013 API UCWA, the Unified Communications Web API? Quite a few, quite a few. So you'll remember that as a part of that API, we did actually enable capabilities with chat and presence. But with this new SDK, we actually abstract those details even further so that it's much easier to implement things like chat and presence with only a few lines of JavaScript code. So we're really focused around making things as simple as possible for developers. Now, one thing that might get you excited on this page is something that we did not offer as a part of Link 2013 and as a part of UCWA is the media capabilities. So now with this Web SDK, we're actually enabling these embedded media scenarios. So if you want to add audio, video directly into your apps, you're going to use this Web SDK, not only in peer-to-peer type communications, but also in multi-party conferences. So you can provide rich multi-view video directly within your apps using this Web SDK. We are releasing the preview version. We will continue to iterate on this set of features that you see here. This is what is going to be available in the preview that you can access today. But you can expect that we're going to expand that set of capabilities even further as the months and next quarters come up to include even more functionality that you come to know from Skype and Skype for Business. I want to pause a little bit. I mentioned this UCWA, and there was a few people who in the room are not familiar with that. This is actually the core technology that powers the Skype Web SDK. So essentially what UCWA is, it's just a RESTful API. So what that actually is it allows communications from your application directly to the Skype for Business server and service all through HTTP. So if you're familiar with other RESTful APIs, you'll notice that I have on the slide here this command channel that includes those common HTTP verbs, so get and post. Things like if you're thinking about I'm grabbing presence from the server, I want to do a get request, or if I'm changing my presence, I might do a post request. Now the other very, very important channel that's over HTTP is this asynchronous channel, this event channel. So in real-time communications, there's many, many scenarios, obviously, where you don't want to have to be polling the server to be getting information. Presence is a great example of that. So with Presence, you might want to actually have a subscription so that the server actually notifies you with an event when that presence has been changed. Things like starting real-time conversations, IM conversations, that's all going to involve asynchronous requests coming back and forth between the server. As a part of Link 2013, we offered a set of client libraries, so JavaScript libraries. Those are actually going to be now replaced by the new Web SDK. We've improved upon that capability to create a much simpler interface to actually access these capabilities that are going over the wire. So even though we abstract a lot of these details, it's important as a developer to understand what's the underlying technology that's happening there. Now you've seen that user service that we just talked about, UCWA. Where does that actually sit on top of the Skype for Business platform. So you can see we have those set of capabilities that we offer with Skype for Business Server and the online service. The user service actually sits on top of that so that your apps can communicate simply by HTTP directly with those core platform services. One point to call out here is that you can see that we actually use this user service for our first-party apps. This service was not just created for third-party developers. We actually leverage this for our own first-party platform. This was not an afterthought. This was actually used, if you've ever used the mobile client, the mobile link client, and now the Skype for Business client, or the web app, that's actually powered by this same RESTful service. And now with the Web SDK, we're actually offering that same first-party platform to third-party developers to integrate in your own experiences. So you can see this Web SDK piece is where we're going to keep our focus today. And now I'm going to pass over to Sri to actually dive into the different components that actually make up that Web SDK.
All right, folks, let's look at the detail. This is the overall picture of the Web SDK. I'll be taking it over piece by piece so you can look at what are all the components that are making the Web SDK, what is it that you can use in your preview, and what is exactly the work that you need to do in your development in order to get moving forward with this one. That's your application experience with your app and your logic. That's where the Skype SDK is going to be sitting. It provides you a rich set of UI controls, and it provides you a set of JavaScript libraries that's very powerful and abstracts out the media, abstracts out the signaling, and abstracts out the auth and identity providers for you. This will enable you to talk to Skype for Business Network, Skype Network, as well as online auth and identity providers, as well as anonymous auth for meeting join scenarios. Let's talk a little bit in detail about the media providers. For local media support, right now, we will be doing that using the Skype for Business web app plugin. We will also be supporting Skype plugin as well as WebRTC. As you might know already, Microsoft has stated its intent to support WebRTC, but it's just not there in the preview, so the next slide takes you to what is actually available in the preview. This is what you guys have got. You can go download, use it today. When you download it, you will be able to use this set of JavaScript object models and interfaces. I will also point you to where the Skype for Business web app plugin is available, and you will be able to use it against your Skype for Business identity, as well as for anonymous meeting join for the starters. As we go, we'll be adding more capabilities, so please stay tuned for any updates that come through. We spoke so much in detail about the platform, about the Web SDK, and we spoke about the components of Web SDK. I'm specifically going to be talking about that JavaScript object model layer here. The core concept that I want to get your attention to is the application object. This is the root object. Without having a reference to it, there is no experience that you can light up. Under this object, you can think of it as 4 main pillars. You have the sign-in, you have the persons and groups, you have the devices for managing your actual hardware devices, and the most important one, you have the communication. We'll talk a little bit in detail about this, and in fact, what will be interesting for you is I'm actually going to show you the actual code and get it to run, show you some traces, so you can actually see under the hood what is happening and how easy is it for the Web SDK, when you use it, how it abstracts all of that complexity out for you. You can go through this in detail. So this talks about the various subcomponents. It's a great reference slide. Please feel free to use it as a one-stop shop for understanding what goes on under the hood. I do want to get your attention to the 4th big pillar that I mentioned. That is the actual conversation experience. Think about what Skype will do for you. You can, if you have the power to embed IM audio video in your web apps from the get-go, how powerful would that be for all of the scenarios? Especially think about the line of business scenarios where you can enable your customer, reach your business directly. You can, in your line of business app, you can have one business employee reach another business employee without ever having to open up their native client at all. So that is why this is critical, because it supports the 4 big pillars that we need to support conversation, messaging, audio, video, as well as history service, which does your hanging on to your existing IM messages, your logs, your timestamps, and all that good stuff. Getting started. Now it's going to get interesting because I'll show you exactly where it is located. You can actually go download it as we speak. You can start looking through it, and you can follow me if that makes it easier for you. Do you want to switch over to my machine then?
Yep, we're switched over.
Beautiful. So this is a brand new portal. Literally, we redid this last week. Go to developer.skype.com. We'll be posting all the links as well as the slide decks. Right in the home page, everybody is already over here. You have this button for start building with Skype. This is also a brand new portal. Again, we put it up last week, right around our build conference time. It has a bunch of platform support stories that Skype provides. Everything is documented in here. This reference backs to that slide that David was talking about, where it shows you the entire spectrum of the platform. Specifically, I want to get your attention to this Web SDK. So that's where you can find all the documentation and everything you need related to Web SDK. The one specific thing that I do want to bring about is, if you guys can see that, is the samples. Go over to these samples. Right there, you will see a download link. Feel free, go ahead, download it, host it locally for now, so you can start following me if that will make it easier, because you can start looking through the code snippets as I'm showing you examples. That's point number 1. The second one I want to get your attention to is very important, the plugin. In order to do media, you need the media plugin. So go to the how-to, go to the first section in the how-to, and over here, we have a specific note that says, where can you get your plugin from? There's a download link here. Feel free to download and install the media plugin. All right. Awesome. Can you switch over, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Cool. With that, let's talk a little bit about what it takes. So you know where to go, you know where to get the code. Let's see what it takes to actually get started and get moving forward and actually start developing against it and see what we can do by the end of the session. First concept, application. I mentioned this again. I'm going to be mentioning this now. I will be mentioning this again as we are doing the coding work, because this is something that you all have to remember. Let's look at how do you refer to the SDK in the first place. You won't find a download link for the actual Web SDK. Here's why. We are hosting this on the Skype CDN. If you actually take a look at the URL over there, that is hosted by us, hosted by Microsoft. Here are the reasons. It's reliable. It's always available because it's hosted on our site. Anytime we have an update or we have a new feature we want to throw in there, we will add it over there, put it in our forums, and then you should know that it's already there and you should be able to use it. And any other changes that are coming through, it should already be there and available for you to use. Did you go to the next one? Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Probably need to hold this in my hand. We most likely will be posting it on our forums. There's a forums link as well that I will include as a reference along with the Skype developer portal. So you have it handy, and if you have any questions, you can post it over there. We can arrange for something like that,
So at the end, I'll talk a little bit about our developer preview program that we've just launched for Skype. If you join that program, you get access to some announcements. We'll basically send out some notifications when we do a new code drop, when we're announcing new features, just so you have those release notes and get the notification about that.
Yes?
On what platform is the plugin supported?
So the plugin is right now supported on IE, Firefox, Safari, as well as Chrome. On Chrome, because of the deprecation of NP API, you would need to go ahead and specifically allow the plugin and enable the plugin to be available. So the operating system we support is Windows as well as the Mac OS.
We have a full matrix of that. So if you do a Bing search for Skype for Business web app plugin, that actually is the same plugin that we're using for the Web SDK. You can see a full matrix of supported platforms for that. So the
plugin does not work on the mobile right now. So for mobile, we're primarily be using our native client.
Just really quickly, can you guys do a URL that doesn't have the version hard-coded?
So good point. That I'll talk a little bit about that in detail as we go forward. What you see right there is not a reference to the actual SDK itself. What you see right there is the reference to a code that instantiates the plugin based on the API key you provide, which is why I'm going to move forward to our next set of slides because that'll connect the dots for you. So I'm going to click one more. All right. As I just mentioned, you need an API key. So the API key that we are using for this public preview is going to be that particular SWX build SDK API. So that is the only API key you have to use. When you use that API key in conjunction with that bootstrapper script that you see up there, it will download the exact package that you need in order to light up your experiences. As we go through the code, I'm going to show you the traces, and I'm going to show you how that's getting loaded over there. All right, a lot of questions. So let's get started, and then we'll start going through the details of some of them.
So what we're about to build out here in this walkthrough are based very heavily and exactly on the samples that are available to you for download. So any of the code that we're looking at is available to you right now to go and take a look. And you can basically do something similar that Shri is going to walk through right now to grab that code and basically put that into your own application.
So I'm going to show you a little bit about, I have a bunch of screens over here. I'm going to show you a little bit about how I'm structuring this so that you have an idea and you can follow along much easily. First thing over here is I have a very simple HTML page. It's got a lot of boilerplate code in it just to light up the UI, so we don't spend a whole lot of time trying to fix up the UI in the session over here. The next thing I want to call about is I have a blank Web SDK session JavaScript file. This is where I'll be showing you how to actually add code for sign-in, for subscriptions, for chat, for audio and video. And as we walk through each module, I split it module by module so it's easier for people to follow and digest. But as we go through each module, we're going to be opening up our web page on the browser and refreshing it and seeing how it actually plays around. So for that, this is how that blank HTML page is going to be shown. Let me bring that up. Excuse me. So this is that blank HTML page that I created. All it has is UI code on the top. It doesn't have any JavaScript fixed up in the background.
So as she's getting started, you'll notice that we're just going to run these samples in Chrome, even though it's a Microsoft presentation. But we just want to highlight that this Web SDK is supported cross-platform across various browsers. So we know that your customers and also your employees in your company are using various browsers, and we support that as a part of the Web SDK.
Cool. So specifically, I'm calling out that the reference to this is actually right here. So you can see how I have laid it out ahead of time and follow along. Let's get started with the first thing I talked about for the last 2-3 minutes, the application object and how do you actually get access to the Web SDK. Let me show you that real quick in code here. As I mentioned, I have actually referenced to this bootstrapper. That's all I have done at the moment. I'm going to be using the Chrome debugging tools at the minute. What you see right now what you see right now is that all I'm downloading is the Web SDK bootstrapper. I have not downloaded the package for the actual Skype Web SDK itself because I haven't done the code I need to download it using that particular API key. Let me show you how to do that in a second. So here's our getting started module over here. Let me actually move this over so I can walk you through the code with the highlighting. All right. So what we have here, I'm probably going to stay here so I can highlight specific sections for you. What we have over here is we have an initialize call using the Skype initialize, and specifically I'm giving that exact same API key that I mentioned. Once we do that, we assign it to an application variable and initiate the create application call. Let me show you what happens in the browser when I do that. All right, so so as you can see here, the minute I actually did my application initialize with that specific API key, now I'm actually able to reference and download it, the exact package I need for that Web SDK. So the line you see here, the SDK build min, that's the package for the Web SDK, and you'll only get it when you give that specific API key over there. All right. There's one other small piece of information I want to get your attention to. That is, what is this client state? So as I mentioned, we have application object followed by the 4 pillars next to it for sign-in and persons and conversations and devices. Sign-in manager is important, and I'm going to kind of talk about it in this module as well as the next module, because it primarily handles your sign-in, sign-out, and your client state. So your client state is important because that's what will enable, will let you know as developers, you need to check that variable to see, am I even signed in? What is my, how can I light up my experiences? The 4 states you normally have for that is signed in, signed out, signing in, and signing out. So you need to tap into those events to see what your next session, next activity is going to be, or next code call is going to be. With that, let me actually switch over to the next topic, which is the sign-in.
So as we're getting set up with sign-in, let's go over what's available in the preview today with sign-in options and auth options. So what's available today is basic authentication, which is essentially using a username and a password, AD credentials to log your user into the web page, same as they would to the Skype for Business client. The second that we're making available now is an integrated auth. So that is a Windows auth integration that's available. And then the third is actually an anonymous meeting join authentication. So those of you familiar with UUCWA would have known that we did support anonymous meeting join with IM only, chat-based. Now with the Web SDK, you can actually have a guest user join into an existing Skype for Business conference, and they don't have credentials. They enter their guest name and can basically be joined directly into that meeting, and also enable full multi-party chat and audio video as a part of that anonymous auth.
Great. Now let's look at actually what happens in the sign-in and how you can leverage all that functionality that David just talked about here. It's very simple, and I'm actually going to show you the difference between how you would do it if you were directly talking against the service. All you're doing over here is the client object. In our case, that's the application object. We're referring to it with a variable client, sign-in manager, and sign-in. In this case, we are using basic authentication for the sake of this demo. And I have a set of username and password already built into my HTML page, just so I don't have to keep typing here again. And what you would see is that as soon as I'm signed in, I would be able to access the me person object. This is also the self object of the signed in user. This is of type person. The reason I'm mentioning it is we have a bunch of other objects that are also of the type person. So when you start connecting the dots, it's going to be easier. So assume that person is this like a contact object that you will have reference to, and me person, which is the self object, is a type of that. So let me switch back over to the browser and run this for you. All right, so we actually downloaded our package. We didn't click on the sign in button. Therefore, our default state of the application is still signed out. So I click the sign in, and right now I am signed in. Let's see what happens. So if you look at the traces, that the browser traces that just get in, the Web SDK handles the sign-in for you. It handles the sign-in, it passes the token, it does the make me available so that you get incoming audio-video invitations. You get all this for basically free with just 2 lines of code. That's all about it. So that shows you how easy it is to get started and moving with the Web SDK.
So there's a whole process that's happening there. Again, like Sri mentioned, under the hood, there's an auto-discovery process against the server. There's you're basically getting a 401 back from the server, and then you need to pass those credentials in the HTTP request so that you return that bearer OAuth token. You'll use that token in subsequent requests so that you're an authenticated user and allowed to access those capabilities of the server. Now, I mentioned that, but the key point here is that when using the Web SDK, you don't need to worry about handling all those details. 3 lines of code, you can do sign-in, where, as before with using the Web API, it would have taken you about 15 different requests that you need to understand what is happening there. So we're really trying to make it as simple as possible for developers.
So there's one more concept that I want to talk about, which is how do you access the information from within an object once you actually have a handle to it. It's a very simple module over here. All it does is that me person object that you got reference to when you were signing in, how do you access its properties? Nothing complicated. All you have to do is know what the properties are. They're documented in our documentation location I already showed you, and just do a .displayname or .title, .email, .status, .note. There are a bunch of other properties. I'm only doing 3 for this session over here. Let's take a look and see how that works. Added new code, restarting it, signing in. That was 3 lines of code to make sure that I'm able to get the data from the actual server and display it on the screen right there. The next concept that I want to talk about is the subscription. So subscription is interesting because this is what you need to do in order to tell the server that, hey, I am a client, I am sitting here, I'm waiting for information. When you change the data of this particular contact or person on the server side, please post back to me. So let me give you instances of where this would be useful. You have your web page, and you have a person that has a mobile client, and the person is signed in and say both endpoints. Now I decide to move away from my machine and I change my presence in my mobile client. That would immediately reflect back on the web page. If it was referenced using a contact object for someone else's portal and they are doing the subscriptions, they would also see that the presence is changing. So basically this is the way of telling the server, hey, post back to me when there are changes. Now I'm going to show you a sample on how you get this present subscription to working in just a few lines of code over here.
So these observable properties are another core concept of this API. So being able to easily subscribe to these changed events of various properties and then get a notification from the server or from the service when that change has actually happened and have that come asynchronously to your code is one of those core concepts that makes this API very powerful to implement these types of presence and contact subscriptions.
Cool. So let's look at the actual method calls that are involved in order to get this subscription to work. So I'm going to go in a reverse order here. The first thing I want to get your attention to is this subscribe event. So in this case, the me person is obviously the signed in object. The status talks about whether he's available, he's online, he's busy, so it talks about the present states over here. And what I'm doing with this code call is actually telling the server that, hey, I am subscribing to this person's presence information. Now, having said that, there are two other pieces of information that you need to be watchful for. The changed event. So when you have a UIL, when you have a person object in our model layer, what you need to do is actually register for a changed event for that particular value. What this tells back to the web SDK is, hey, whenever the server changes, you need to go and actually change the value within yourself so that you can reflect it appropriately in the UI. There's one other keyword I want to talk about here as well, which is this set keyword. So in this case, say I am on the web page and I want to actually change my presence using my web application itself. How do I do that? In order to change any property that you have the ability to change, all you have to do is by using the set variable. You can only change presence for the you can only change the presence and the note and the status for the signed in user. You obviously cannot change someone else's presence, so the set is not available on the other user except for on the me person object here. Let's take a quick look at how this would work. So refreshed the samples, getting it to the default state, signing in. All right. And I'm going to be showing the user's information. I want you to watch what I'm doing here because I'm actually going to show you how this changes the presence. What I did over here is I still haven't subscribed to the presence. As you can see, the status is not set. And I want you to watch the post request that goes back in. So I have signed in into my link client, native client, as a different user that has added this web user as a contact. So if you see, that is Casey Hicks over here. What I'm going to do is do a presence subscription, make sure that that person's current presence show up, change it, and you can actually see it change on the other side. So that is the presence of this particular user, and it shows that it's online. Now I'm going to go ahead and change this to busy. Immediately you see that the other person that has subscribed for Casey's presence is actually seeing that it's changing. This is happening because you actually did the set method and you are able to post it back to the server. Let's quickly look at the traces. What you see is we have done a bunch of gets on the presence to initially get the presence of the user when she was still available or green. And in order to change it, what the Web SDK did is actually do a post on the presence, and that posted the message back to the server and changed it, and that would then go to any other endpoint that has subscribed for the presence of that particular user. All of this in like one small module, and you don't have to worry about all the calls that are going underneath it or how to handle them in your code.
So if we took a look at that trace and we just examined that JSON payload that's actually going over the wire, you'd see that you're sending over that status directly in that payload to the server. One interesting way we were taking a look here and going through the debugging tools in the browser. I might just call out here, if anybody is familiar with web development, one great tool to make use of is Fiddler. So Fiddler, similar to debugging tools, lets you inspect the traffic, but also create your own filters and modify traffic. So that's it's a great tool for debugging web applications as you're kind of going through all of these samples and all of this code.
Question over here.
Yes.
Are there restrictions in terms of, first of all, can I pull contact lists? And then are there restrictions in terms of who I can actually subscribe to? I can see there's no, I'm assuming there's a whole lot of error handling, et cetera, if I try to subscribe to somebody who doesn't want me to see them or doesn't exist personally.
Yes, so there is capabilities with pulling contact lists. You can pull the contacts. The permissions will actually be similar to the permissions that are given to the client itself. So this is almost like a client replacement endpoint. So if that particular user has access to subscribe to another user, whether there's certain IT admin rules that have been set that I can see that presence, you can actually find those users. And the scenario there that might be common is federated users, for example. So we also support that also. So if you were trying to search for a contact and that user was outside of your organization, but you're federated, you'd still be able to find those using the search. So as a part of the samples, we have a search sample that's built in there and also a contacts that allow you to pull specific contact lists and also pull specific groups that you have assigned for that particular user.
Awesome. So now that we have done the core basic scenarios, let's look at something a little more interesting. How do you actually do the communication? I spoke a little bit about the 4 pillars that we need in order to light up communication. I'm going to be talking through them one by one. First, let's start with the chat service. Basic IM conversation that you send from one endpoint to the other endpoint. I have a snippet of code here that shows you what and how you can do it, and I'm going to walk through it over here. So the concept I want to drive is the conversations. We have the application object, we have the conversations manager as I just showed you, and under this there is a collection of conversations. This is useful when you want to have multiple conversations like how the native client supports with multiple users at the same time. You create multiple conversations and you add it to the collection so that the web client is able to figure out that I have multiple conversations going on here. So this statement, client.create conversation, creates you an empty conversation. It doesn't have any participants or it doesn't have any modalities. Now it's our responsibility to figure out, okay, who is the user that I want to talk to and add them as a participant, and what are the modalities or the chat or audio that I need to include for this conversation. So let me see how that works. What I do is create an empty conversations. I add it to the conversations collection over here, and the next thing I do is do an add participant. So add participant, what I do is conversations.participant.add. This participant is also of type person object. That's the same object as the me person object as well. So now I'm trying to connect the dots on how the person object is aligned. The next thing I do is the conversation.chat service, and this is what is needed for the actual IM. And all I do is send message. So that's all you need to do in order to actually send the IM conversation out. There's one other concept that I want to talk about, which is the create message which is the message history over here. So what I have over here is the conversation.history service. This is one of the 4 items that I mentioned. This is useful for you to save your incoming, outgoing conversation to show that in the message view, as well as your call logs and your timestamp. Let's quickly see how we can get this demonstrated. Refreshing the page, making sure our existing functionality is still operating, and you should see right there, I can see a notification, and all by doing the chat service.start, and I'm internally sending an IM message over here. And let me show you how you can do the message window.
Can I do this anonymously so that I have an external participant who is essentially an anonymous user launching a conversation with somebody else, or is anonymous strictly defined only to joining a meeting?
For the public preview, anonymous is strictly restricted to joining a meeting. We will be looking at adding other capabilities as we go.
Is there a timeline on that?
We are working on it, and we'll post back on the forums as we have any updates on that.
On that point also, I'll just throw in another plug. We'll give a link at the end to the developer preview program. As a part of that program, we want to also collect your feedback. So if that's a top scenario for you, a top priority, we want to get your feedback so we can evaluate the business impact and get a lot of feedback on those various capabilities. Another quick question?
I'm curious about the session model behind the login. I noticed that every time you add code, you go and refresh the page, and that resets
On the server?
Well, you never click your logout button on your client.
Oh, I don't, well, in this case, I don't have to, because as I'm adding new code, I just have to refresh to make sure it's picking it up.
Does the server think you logged in 7 times?
No. The server does not think it's logging in 7 times. When I'm refreshing the page, internally, the Web SDK calls out the client state and makes a signed out on it. The first call that I mentioned about the 4 states that we support, the Web SDK actually does that call out. The server thinks that this application is not available anymore, and so it disconnects the connection. So no, you won't be seeing 7 logins on the server.
And as far as conversations are concerned, there is a way as a part of the code to actually manually end that conversation. And then also the conversation, same as they would as a Skype for Business conversation, that will actually, you can either manually close or end that session, or there's a timeout associated with that. After a certain amount of time, that conversation will be essentially destroyed on the server.
I guess a request for you guys in the future would be, as this gets more sophisticated and we move cross pages, it'd be really great to have persistent capability demos in what you're doing, because that now makes it much more.
That's great feedback. Thank you. We will, as we add more scenarios, we'll be adding that in the forums. So just to show you the flow on this one, and because we are adding it to the history service, which appends it to your existing messages, I do want to do like a quick test message over here, and to make sure that we are actually flowing messages back and forth just with that one call. It's not just a simple out, and that's it. So with that, I'm going to move forward to our newer capabilities that are provided exclusively by this Web SDK, which is the media capabilities. How do you tap into audio and video? Yes, sir?
Just a quick question on the sign-in process. If you have a director and then you have the front-end server, will it retry each one because it has to authenticate to each server?
Yes, every time it's getting redirected to another machine, the web is another pool or another front end. The Web SDK will actually abstract all that out for you. So the entire auth flow is handled at the SDK layer.
So one other important concept as we're getting set up for the audio is the promises A+ specification that we use for this API. So you'll notice that as a part of the code, you'll see this .then method throughout the code. So essentially what a promise is, it actually just represents the eventual result of an asynchronous request. So the primary way to interact with that promise is using that .then method, and that actually will then register those callbacks. So either the promise will be a success eventually, you'll get that back, or there may be an error, which you'll also get returned as a part of that. So you notice that we didn't really go into, we're not going to spend time on the details of handling those errors, but as a part of that promise specification, we've stuck very close to that, and it's kind of a standard JavaScript specification that'd be good to kind of read up on and understand. But that actually allows you to handle whether that asynchronous request was actually successful or not. If not, you should handle those errors within your code.
Great. And we're going to look at one more sample over here in order to see how you can start an audio chat over here. It's going to be outgoing at the moment. I just added that piece of code, and then I'll walk through the code once we look at this. So I'm going to be doing the signing in. Again, it doesn't make an 8th sign-in on the server. Just making sure our existing functionality is persisting. Yep. All right. Now, let's see what I can do. I'm starting the audio call with this person. As you see below, you're actually seeing that the Web SDK is handling the SDP negotiation for you and getting the media initialized. Now, I'm getting the audio call over here. As you can see. Hello. As you can see, I got audio connected. I see interference on my screen, so I'm going to cut the audio call. Let's quickly take a look at what we had to do in order to do that outbound audio call. It's the same concept just like we did for the chat service. Create a conversation. It's empty with no modalities and no participants. You add a participant. In this case, I added that zip URI that I had already on the screen. And instead of doing the chat service.start, I did audio service.start, and that ended up making an outgoing conversation for you right there. So it's literally 10 lines of code. We handle all the media abstraction underneath it, and you're getting started in less than half an hour over here. So we've done a whole bunch of scenarios. We've done all the way up to video, and all the way up to audio, and I want to see what it would take to light up video. Very simple piece of code here, and let's look at the final module for our code walkthrough session.
So as we're going through this, we're taking a certain flow here in our application. We're starting out with chat, then we're adding audio, then we're adding video. We also enable, you can pick and choose what the scenario is for your particular application. So in a second, after we're done through the code, I'll show an example scenario where, in this case, we just want to expose video from within the web page. So you can actually leverage that audio service to start directly in the web page. Well, a couple more minutes. I also want to spend a couple minutes just again. We mentioned that today we're supporting the Skype for Business web app media plugin. I want to call that out because we really get the most questions about that as a part of this web SDK. And we've announced our intention, and we're working together with our Internet Explorer team as well as the Skype team to see and enable this plugin-less media model actually built right into the browser. We today use the plugin because in order to, there's not yet a kind of standard specification that's supported across all the major browsers that will work for all customers. So using the plugin, you can make sure that you can actually support those different browser types. But one key point for developers is that we abstract away that media controller details. So even though today you're using the plugin, and if you write your app today, you'd have to use that media plugin. Because we abstract away those details, once we have that media model built directly into the browser, we will basically use the SDK to choose the best possible media experience for that user. So your users likely may have older versions of browsers that's not going to support the latest plugin-less media. Because we handle the media controller, we can actually control that for you and present the best possible experience. If that user has a plugin-less media supported as a part of their browser, you can leverage that because we abstract away that control. Yeah, quick question.
Yeah, so I mean, we have that requirement right now where we know that people who have Firefox that WebRTC turned on, and they could or should be able to do it without us asking them to install something.
Mm-hmm.
When are you guys actually going to turn on that capability for, Firefox should work today?
So let me also be clear. So what does work today, then you can use this SDK. If you're using the SDK for signaling and you're going browser to browser, that'll work. If you're going from one browser to browser and you're handling the media from there, that works. What doesn't work is actually interoping with the Skype for Business server. So the scenarios that you want are much richer than just a straight, peer-to-peer, browser-to-browser call, which we all know that we can do today for browser-to-browser. So what we're looking at, and that's why we've announced our intention to do this, is actually having that interop support with the Skype for Business server so that if you have these plugin-less media endpoints, you can join them into full conferences. You can add more modalities like desktop sharing, things that you can't get from like a standard peer-to-peer browser session. So we don't have any dates around that, but we have announced that we are in progress with that work.
Awesome. So now let's look at the final sample and final demonstration of our module, which is adding video, and let me walk through that video code for you real quick. So again, I have a fresh instance over here. Client status default signed out. I'm signing in, making sure all our functionality is still appropriate. Starting that IM conversation. You can see that the conversation is happening. Right, making sure our audio is still functional. You can see that the audio negotiation is happening under the hood. I'm going to add video. And we were just able to add video into the browser browser, outgoing video in this case, so that link client is actually rendering the video, keeping the UI on the browser simple. And let me quickly walk through what is the code involved on your side to do this very quick outbound video. So we had chat service.start for messaging, audio service.start for audio, outbound audio. Any guesses on what it's going to be for video service? David?
Exact same thing.
Pretty much. So what we're doing over here, again, is abstracting all that complexity and doing video service.start. Sorry, I think I jumped a couple of modules over here. What we're doing over here is basically video service.start, and that's all you need to do to send an outgoing conversation. There's one other aspect I want to talk about, which is how do you handle incoming conversations. So if you look at the same audio service, video service, and chat service, we have methods in there for accept and reject. So if you are having an incoming notifications, you can use those methods to either accept the call or reject the call. With
Determine where incoming video is to search in the browser. Do I just create a div and tell it, put the video into this div?
Would you please repeat the question?
For incoming video to display video in the browser, do I just create a div?
Yes, you create a div, and there is a particular source and sync that you need to handle in the video call. It's all in the samples if you want to go look at the details, and you just attach it to that div and do the accept on it for the video to actually show up. With that, we're done with the code. Yes, go ahead.
When a remote person initiates, start the conversation.
Yes, that is the incoming video. That's when the next.
The chat conversation.
No, you can do incoming audio, video, and chat conversation from a remote participant into a browser participant. You will have notifications object that you would need to handle again with the accept or reject, as I mentioned. But you will be able to do bidirectional, peer-to-peer, as well as multi-party audio-video conversations, conferences, and also do multi-view video using the Web SDK at this point in time.
When the remote person initiates the conversation, do you get their username or?
Yes. The question was when the remote person initiates the conversation, do you get their username? Yes, you get their username, as well as you could potentially get the subject of the conversation and all that. Awesome. So with this, we are done with the code walkthrough. And David here is going to show us how you can actually get started very quickly and moving forward like by end of day today.
All right, great. We looked through those samples there, and so the link that Shri had shown, if you start off on developer.skype.com, you can actually download those samples. And what I've actually done is I've just downloaded those samples. Sorry, wrong tab. I've downloaded those samples, and I've actually just hosted them locally on my machine. One question you may have, I know a lot of people will have a Link 2013 or Skype for Business server on premises. But what happens if you don't have that today because the preview is only supported on premises? So we actually offer a developer sandbox where in case you don't have those accounts or in case for some reason you don't have access to be able to deploy those applications to your own company domain, we actually provide you with a set of users that you can use to kind of run through the samples and basically get started with the sample code. So the way to get access to those tokens is today, if you might have seen this site before, is the ucwa.link.com. We'll shortly be transitioning this to ucwa.skype.com, but for today, you can just access it at ucwa.link.com. And you can see here we have some information. This link just will take you to the MSDN page that Shri had already shown. But if I want to actually get a set of users that I can use with the samples, you see we have this kind of interactive demo here at the bottom, or you can actually access this by just clicking on sign in. So I'll click here. And as I log in, it's just going to ask me for a simple MSA. You can use any MSA account. And once you get signed in, there's actually this kind of interactive demo experience you can go through just to see some of the capabilities of the API. I'm just going to close out of this because I really just want to get to these user accounts. So you can see here that we've actually checked out these set of users for you to use, and those actually will last for 8 hours. And if you want to renew those tokens again after 8 hours, you can definitely do that and keep using those for your development. This is essentially the token that's returned by the server once you get through that authentication process. So if you want to actually use these, within the sample, all I have to do is kind of copy this token first. So I've been checked out 3 users, Amy, Fernando, and Sarah. I'm going to log in as Amy here. And I'll see in the instructions, all I need to know is that I just need to enter this domain, meteo.net. So I'll go over to the samples. And again, I'm hosting these just locally on my machine. I see I have the option to use my own topology. So that's what you saw right at the beginning of the session. I just logged in with my Microsoft.com credentials. Here I'm going to use the developer sandbox because I don't have an on-premise environment. So the domain is meteo.net. The token, well, I just copy that directly. Let's make sure you get the word bearer as a part of that. I'll click the sign in. And then right now I'm actually right from the web page being authenticated into these samples. So this is live code that I've just downloaded. And now I already have example web pages that are showing these integrated communications right in the web page. So I can see my user is Amy Alberts. I can go through. I can change my status. I can change my note. I can select through other sets of capabilities like searching context. I think there was a question over there. Starting chat, looking at device manager. So this was one of those key pillars that Sri talked about. The API will then pull the information of the different cameras I have available for this machine, and I can set that up. Another interesting sample that will be useful for many of you is this anonymous meeting join. So being able to have guest users join into an existing conference. So this is the basic sample. These are available to use. So check out developer.skype.com to download these samples. You've seen kind of the samples. You've seen the code walkthrough. Before we take any questions, now I kind of want to show a real-world demo scenario before we jump back into the deck, just to give you an idea of some of the type of line of business apps you might be thinking about and enabling for your own organization. So I'm going to jump over here. And what you see here is we just have a line of business application. This is just a web app. In this case, we're going to look at a healthcare scenario. So here I'm actually logged into the page as this doctor, Dr. Andy O'Donnell. I'm a Skype for Business user. I've got this custom doctor portal. You can see we've already used the web SDK. We've integrated presence information here at the top of the page. I actually see my next appointment has arrived, so I got a notification. My next appointment is Kate. What's actually happening here is Kate, who's played by Sri, is actually joining a call from her Skype client. So she's a patient and joining in from the Skype consumer client, and I'm over here on the Skype for Business web portal. I can see she's been put into a waiting room, so she's waiting me to join this appointment. So I'm going to click here to get into that appointment. What you can see is immediately I'm presented with this custom page. I have context information that's been pulled from our health database and also integrated together with data that's been pulled from my patient's Microsoft band. So you can see right within the web page, I'm actually now connected. Oh, where's my patient? Oh, there she is. I'm now connected in a full AV call experience directly within the web page. Plus, I've also got this additional context information at the side of the video. So to add richness to this conversation, I can see Shri's steps. I can see she's been exercising quite a bit. That looks great. Take a look at her sleep patterns. Okay, that looks good. I can even, take notes within the page, maybe view previous notes from the last appointment. If I want to jump to full screen video, for example, maybe I could just jump this. There we go. Now I'm in full screen video conversation right within the web page. So that can give you, one example here. So in this demo, we've actually leveraged the Skype Web SDK, but now we've extended these capabilities to leverage the reach of the Skype network. So Shri is calling into this appointment from Skype Consumer. And now I've got this additional context that's been integrated in the web page to help out with this conversation. So the real power here is being able to put this directly into context of your line of business apps and add in that additional context to conversations. All right, now we'll end this call. I'll go back to my schedule. So jumping back to the slides. So we'll talk briefly on this. I want to give a little bit of time for questions at the end of the session. I just want to call out a couple key points for IT admins or when you're thinking about actually deploying your applications to an organization. So today with the server as we're supported on premises, one thing you'll need to do with your web applications is actually add the domain where your app is hosted to the allowed list of the Skype for Business server. The reason you have to do this is because issues related to cross-domain scripting. So if you're not familiar with that, browsers and the server will actually block those requests unless that's an actual allowed domain. And you can think of a scenario that happens if you had your banking open in one tab in your browser and another app in the other browser. You don't want to allow that other domain to be sending requests possibly to that banking page that could make a transaction, for example. So you need to add your domain to the kind of trusted and allowed list of the server. And here's those commands. You can, again, find this on our documentation and website. One common error you'll see if you haven't gone through this process is you'll get a 403, basically that the service does not allow a cross-domain request from that origin. Once you allow that domain, your web app should work great. There's not any other additional steps for an IT admin to actually provision this web application. All right, next steps. So we mentioned this at the beginning. Again, mentioned it one more time, developer.skype.com. Head to that site, check out the latest information about the Skype developer platform. Download the Web SDK. Everything that we showed here today is available for download. You can get started right now on this. Support against Skype for Business Server now, and we'll be releasing announcements going forward about when we're actually going to support that against the online service. I mentioned this also earlier. If you write down this link, this is a link to our Skype Developer Preview program. So as a part of that program, you'll get some announcements about when we're doing new code drops, some extra additional information and training, as well as a way that you can give feedback on the API. So if you have certain features that are a high priority for your company, you can go into that feedback form, give us the feedback. If you encounter bugs, this is a preview release. We're releasing it publicly as preview. You may encounter some bugs, you may encounter feedback you have on certain features. Please input that into that portal there, and we'll collect all that information. In summary, we kind of went over the details of the Web SDK today, showed you how to get started, where you can get that code, where you can get the samples. Please take a look at these links, and after the session, please make sure to send in your evaluations.
Great.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? If you could use the microphones, please, yeah.
So this preview will work against the Skype for Business or Link 2013 server?
Yes, it will work against either of them.
So there's no changes to UCWA on the back end to support this then?
The Skype for Business server has additional capabilities that you will be able to leverage with this Web SDK. Whatever you have in Link 2013, that should work as is. There is no change you need to do for UCWA for this.
Okay, thank you.
So the capabilities we showed today work against Link 2013. There will be new capabilities as a part of Skype for Business going forward that will obviously, those features will not be supported against Link 2013. So things like contact management, group management, which was not supported even in the clients against Link 2013. Those same features will not be supported in the Web SDK. But the features that we saw in the preview here, those are supported against Link 2013.
Okay, thank you.
For the sample accounts that you showed, are there code samples about how to use the domain and token instead of username and password? I didn't see this in the code walkthrough. How to use those.
Yes, it is actually in the sample itself, in the sign-in sample when you look at it.
It shows how to do both username and domain and token?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Can you hear me just fine? Okay.
Yeah, you can.
Extensibility. Will the SDK have the ability to be extended, or at least the server itself, for, like, say, routing? Like, I want to do a custom routing algorithm.
Yeah.
Is that part of the preview, or will that be?
Definitely. So what I'd recommend is not directly within the Web SDK. So as a part of the developer platform, we actually offer a set of server capabilities to do various scenarios like call routing, contact center, doing queuing type applications. Right. So those capabilities are still supported and are supported in combination with the Web SDK. So if you check out the recording of this session yesterday, we had a partner, Clarity, joining, who actually has built a full contact center. They've also integrated the Web SDK. So they have customers coming in and agents also on a web portal. And then they have built in, using our server-side developer capabilities, all that complex routing, sending calls to the right places, putting them in queues, everything like that.
All right, so all that's going to be on the server then, effectively.
Yes, correct.
If you want to integrate in a mobile client, not only presence but also video and audio, is that possible with the release of today, or do you need to wait for WebRTC?
For the plugin, we are for the media right now. We are using a plugin.
Yeah.
That plugin would work on Windows operating system and Mac OS. It does not directly work on
That's
the
the same plugin
mobile.
as if you join a meeting anonymously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. For the mobile, you would be able to use all the capabilities except the plugin directly. You could use the URIs to launch out to native clients.
Oh yeah.
So there are some great options if you check out our mobile URI support for both Skype for Business and Skype. There's capabilities. You could have everything to IM and presence integrated right in your app, and then utilize the URIs to actually launch to a media experience directly from the mobile app.
That's not embed, and then you will pop up the app.
You'll still have to, it's required to have the mobile client installed, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And is that something you can detect already before the user clicks?
I think depending on the platform that you're talking about, there are certain platform and APIs for platforms to discover if that app is installed. If not, direct the user to the appropriate download page in the App Store.
All right.
That responsibility is going to be on the app to do the detection. The Web SDK internally does not do the detection for you. Yes. You had a question, sir?
Will we be able to do this on desktops at some point?
You are going to be able to do this on the browsers on the desktop.
As a native application, like a universal application?
We are looking at options on how we can make this available. We'll have some more details for you as we go.
Did you have any plans for adding persistent chat to this?
Again, it's new feature capabilities. We are evaluating some of them, and we'll be adding some of them going forward. We'll just keep you posted on the forums.
You don't have any timelines right now?
I don't have any timelines for you at the moment.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to come talk to us afterwards.